So we find that for students who are under-resourced, underrepresented in STEM due to their social, economic, or cultural situations, they learn better when they're given opportunities to use what they're learning to create tools that have direct impact in helping them and their families and their immediate communities. And this is a more project-based learning approach than what's in more traditional introduction to digital learning classrooms. And it really helps them develop interest in computing, a sense of personal identity as a creator of technology instead of just a passive consumer. And we see that when that switch is flipped in their head, when they become this creator, it's a really powerful moment. And it also creates this sense of belonging in the larger tech community. And we see all of that is very important for lifelong persistence in digital learning. And in my work, as I mentioned, the action part of computational action refers to mobile apps with real world impact. And again, that's because just smartphones are currently the most accessible tool. We work with families from LMIC countries where the entire family only has one digital device. And when that's the case, it's always a smartphone. So that becomes their pathway for the student to learn digital skills and gain these new opportunities. And sometimes for adults as well, right? When they're upskilling or reskilling. I think I'll give just one quick example. So in the last year, we held a global AI hackathon that was free and virtual. And we received the submission from Ghana that really struck me and left an impression. It was by a team of 2 students. One was a high school age boy and the other was a middle school age girl. And they were going to install solar panels and wind generators in their neighborhood. And these students wanted to figure out where the best location was to put these pieces of technology. So they got these very affordable sensors and they would leave them in places that they were debating whether or not to put a solar panel or a wind turbine for one day. And because they're using mobile phones, it's very easy to move from location to location. And they would graph the data on like how much light there is or how much wind there is on the smartphone. And when I was learning about their creation process, the part that like inspired me the most was the students were saying how when they were working on the project, they would be at school and they would be coding or developing and the power would go out. So they couldn't work anymore. And they were so engaged in the process that they were like, oh, let's go to the library. And they would walk for half an hour, go to the library, work there. And then when the library closed, they would try to go to someone's house to finish the project. So I think that really shows when you're giving students an opportunity to create something that they really care about and can improve their lives, they'll go the extra mile to really engage in that digital learning themselves. So in summary, I would say that my approach to engaging youth in digital education focuses on mobile access and computational action. So empowering them to connect their own personal learning of digital skills to actually creating technology that makes a positive impact in their local communities.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Natalie. That's some fascinating examples there, particularly your reference to the co-creation of mobile apps, the fact that you are adopting a project-based learning approach. I think the fact that you've reached up to 11 million learners across the world, and particularly in low and middle income countries, is particularly interesting, and definitely we'd be interested to explore a lot more about what that means in terms of designing for scale, reaching large numbers of learners with this particular approach that you've adopted. And I particularly appreciated your emphasis also on families, so that it's not just individual learners, but that they're also engaging as peers with their friends, but also with their families. And I think this notion of computational action in community is actually quite a powerful message. So thank you for sharing that. Werner, your work at the EdTech Hub fills a very critical void in our collective knowledge and learning about the design, the implementation, and the evaluation of digital learning interventions. And it's particularly important because we also know that there have been many interventions that have also failed, that have not been successful. And so this process of gathering the evidence and learning from these experiences is in terms of the work that you do at the EdTech Hub is particularly important. So we are very interested to learn more about how you've approached this work around evidence, building the evidence base, particularly in education communities who navigate structural inequalities in their daily lives. So if you could tell us more about your work in this respect, please, Werner.
Thank you so much, Shafika. And I'm actually also delighted to be part of the conversation. And thank you so much to UNESCO for hosting and creating a platform for a chat where we can really zero in on the issues of learning equity on this International Day for Digital Learning. So at the EdTech Hub, I lead a consortium of researchers and practitioners that are really dedicated to making meaningful contributions to the sector. Our work is deeply rooted in understanding that digital learning is not a one-size-fits-all solution. And it's also not the panacea to solve all our educational challenges. So we bring a very balanced and realistic approach to the sector. Our goal primarily is to empower stakeholders in the sector with the evidence that they need in order to make the decisions about what EdTech tool to use, what works in what context and under what circumstances, really to move the needle on student learning. So at the end of the day, I always want to focus on improving student learning. We work very closely with ministries of education in low and middle income countries to generate evidence and insights that really inform effective context-specific EdTech solutions. And we're committed to serving communities that face structural inequalities. Inequalities that include many of the myriad of challenges that we've already discussed: limited connectivity, limited electricity, accessibility challenges, and a series of other financial barriers. I'll walk through very quickly 3 components of our approach, with the caveat that these are highlights or snapshots and not all encompassing of our ways of working to address structural inequalities. And I'll start primarily with a component that is really central to the session today, which is the concept of co-creation. A major aspect of our approach is really engaging with stakeholders to co-create solutions that are not only effective, but solutions that are sustainable and sustainable in low-resourced communities. In order to co-create these solutions, it's really important to understand what problems of practice are we trying to solve for, and then to identify the appropriate technology tools or suite of resources to help address these specific or unique problems. To do this in each of our focus countries, the EdTech Hub has 1 or 2 country leads who are from the local country and work directly with governments, donor partners, and other EdTech stakeholders. These team members work side by side with government partners, oftentimes even embedded in ministries of education, and have a very nuanced understanding of the day-to-day local context, the educational challenges that are being faced, and the importance of championing data-driven decision-making and evidence in decision-making. Through this intensive and ongoing, what I think of as a co-working relationship, our team members also become trusted and close partners to help inform and shape and advise on EdTech-related interventions, on policies and opportunities to pursue. So the takeaway here is that this intensive co-working has really facilitated or fostered a culture of co-creation and a focus on evidence-based interventions. A quick concrete example I'll share is of what this looks like in action is we have our country, Malawi is one of our focus countries, and our country lead in Malawi, Pilarani, is actually embedded in Malawi's Department of Digital Education and Learning. And he's been embedded there for a good 2 years already and ongoing. He supports Dr. Valletta, who leads that department, with a series of government priorities, including a recent effort to consolidate the many teaching and learning resources that have been developed by donor-funded programs into a single government-hosted platform to ensure, again, that all schools benefit from these resources. Our second approach that I'll touch on very quickly is, as a research consortium, of course, our goal is to increase the use of evidence in EdTech decision-making. But we know that when we launched our work with the EdTech Hub, we recognized very quickly that the evidence base in low resource communities is very slim. So a huge part of our work is actually generating evidence through rigorous research on a series of digital learning interventions to, again, determine what works for whom and under what conditions. So we currently have a portfolio of about 15 plus research studies underway that address the gamut of interventions from low tech, high tech, and in some cases, no tech. And recognizing again that in order to address structural inequalities of specifically connectivity, we have to look at low tech interventions and how low tech interventions that can be scaled in ways that are cost effective. Interventions that typically don't rely on a device per se or connectivity. For example, an intervention that we've been looking at is TV penetration. We know that TV programming actually has broader penetration in some of the countries that we work with. So a concrete example is our work with Busara and Ubongo, where we have a study underway to assess educational TV programming and how it can or cannot improve literacy amongst young children in Kenya. So again, looking to how we can support governments in thinking more broadly around lower cost interventions that may not have the barriers around infrastructure and technology. So as we close out some of our research studies, we will be sharing our findings via an evidence library that we have online, conference presentations, etc. The last piece that I'll touch on very quickly is a really important one, which is around bridging that gap between research and action and ensuring that the evidence that we develop or we generate or that's out there not only reaches decision makers and practitioners, but are actually being used, that there's the ability to process the evidence and use it to inform and shape policies and strategies. An area where we're seeing a real uptick in interest and a need for guidance from ministries of education across the world is around developing national digital learning plans or strategies. To date, we've worked with about 20 countries to explore ways to develop and implement national digital plans or strategies. And the approach really is to focus on making sure that whatever is developed is actually in service of the larger goals of the national education sector plans. And this really helps mitigate for a tech-first approach and keeps the focus on inclusivity and universal access to education. I will say that we have a few really nice examples of engaging with ministries around digital learning plan development. More recently, we worked with a collaboration with UNICEF and Cambodia in drafting a really pioneering digital education strategy aimed at implementing it within Cambodia's school system. And then very recently as well, a collaboration between World Bank and the Sierra Leone Ministry of Education, where we supported the government of Sierra Leone in developing a national digital learning strategy. And the team starts with really looking at understanding the landscape, doing a bit of an analysis, identifying achievements, gaps, progress to date, key challenges, and then priorities moving forward. We do have a suite of resources, recognizing that this was a high need area. We do have a suite of resources that we've developed and that could be accessed via our website, and really guidance documents on what should ministries of